Hey guys, and welcome back to my Illustrator Basics, Illustrator CC Basics course. And this lesson is 2.2, which is shapes. Now, as you recall, the last lesson we talked about lines and all of the line tools, and some of them, as you recall, or you may recall, you can use like the pen tool, and you can create shapes, which then of course you can add a stroke and fill to and change their appearance. Now that is the easy short version of one thing that you already know that you can use to make shapes. The next we're going to go over the all of these shape building tools, and we will start over here on the toolbar. So over on the toolbar, the first shape building or the first shape tool is the rectangle tool, which you see here is the letter M on your toolbar or your keyboard, which is M for marquee, because it looks like a big marquee that you would have the name displayed of the actors. Work with me here. So M will get the rectangle tool. And the rectangle tool will, you can make rectangles, obviously. So you can drag the shape and you make the starting corner, and then you drag and then you let go, and that is the opposite corner, and so that is how you can create the shape. And you can make them short and long, and you can make them tall and skinny, and you can put them wherever you'd like. Now if you want to make a square, the square is going to be click and hold and drag your shape, but then at the same time hold down shift. And if you do that, this is the modifier for a constraining to a regular rectangle, and a regular rectangle is called a square. So that makes it pretty easy. So that's hold down shift. So I can make a square anywhere I want to. I can make lots of squares. And again, the fill and stroke color are defined by whatever you have chosen over here. In this case, it is still the default colors, white fill and a black stroke. And now I have some really cool looking abstract art on my screen. So that is how to kind of make your rectangle shapes. Let us Control A or Command A on a Mac and then hit delete, and we will delete all of those because I want to show you something else. So just like the line segment tool, if you recall, if you hold down Alt on your PC or Option on your Mac, the cursor changes, and you see it's kind of it's the same cursor, but it has these little corners. And basically what it means is anywhere I click and start dragging from will be the center of my new rectangle. And you see that? If I am still dragging, holding down my mouse button or holding down my stylus, and I let go of the Alt key, you'll see that it has moved so that that is the starting point, and I'm creating my rectangle. But no, I want it constrained so that that is not the starting point but the center point, and there you go. So let's do a couple of those. Again, hold down Alt or Option, and you can do them tall and skinny, you can do them short and fat, you can do them any sort of size that you would desire, and you can have a bunch of rectangles on your screen. Now, just like any of the other shape tools, and you'll see as we go, well, not all of them, but just like the line segment tool, we can also hold down shift and constrain. And so if we want to make a square, a perfect square that is constrained around a center point, Well, for that we hold down Shift and we hold down Alt at the same time, and lo and behold, it's a perfect square constrained around that center point. And so I can locate the center using my Smart Guide, and you can see right there when I'm on the center, it'll have that green and it'll say center. And so I will click that point and drag out, and so now I have a perfect center, and I still have that it's perfect center, or excuse me, a perfect square centered on that point, and I know that because I was using Shift and Alt at the same time. So Alt will go constrained from center, Shift will make a square, Shift and Alt will make a square from center. Okay? So that's how we can draw on the artboard with our tools, or with our peripherals, using the mouse or the stylus, whichever we happen to use. But let's say we want to be more precise. As you recall, with the line segment tool, we could just click a point and define what we wanted to use for our measurements and degrees. In this case, we will do something similar. So let me clear the screen, and again, that is Control A on a Mac or a PC, Command A on a Mac, and then I will hit delete and they all disappear. So let's click just any old place with our mouse or my stylus, and I get this box that says rectangle. And so I can define in there, for example, if I want to do 3.25 inches by 2.5 inches, and click OK, I now have a nice square, or not a square, a nice rectangle in the place, and it's going to start at that point that I clicked. So for example, if I want to click down here, and I can use my Smart Guide, this green line that you see up here, and I will click there, and I can do another one, and now I have a perfect copy of that, and it stores the last shape that the last rectangle that I used in any time I click that to bring up that box. So here it is again, and apparently 3.25 inches is 234 points. Maybe I should change my unit of measure so it makes more sense to me instead of using points and inches, but that's another issue. That's back on one of the previous lessons. I haven't done that. I'm still using points in this case. So anyway, I've got my rectangle box. I'll click OK, and now I have another box that is aligned with these other two because I had it on that Smart Guide, but then it's also the same size. And so that is clicking with the box, and I can change and do a 1-inch width and a 9-inch tall rectangle, and you see that there. So I have some precise control over the size of the rectangle based on where I place my cursor. Now let me clear these. So Control A on a PC, Command A on a Mac, then hit delete, and I can Alt and single click, and you see my icon. Whenever I hit Alt, it changes again to that expand from center, or constrain from center, whichever you want to call it. I'll call it expand from center to make it easier. So expand this rectangle from center, and let's use the same 1 inch by 9 inches, and instead of coming from this point and going down, it's going to use that as the center point. Let's delete that. Let's do a smaller one. Let's go over here and make a 2-inch by 6-inch, and now it's again constrained upon that center. So I can use that center point and do this again, and do 6 inches wide by 2 inches tall, and it's going to do the exact opposite as that previous rectangle. And it's constrained upon that center, or expanded on that center, so that you know that it's a perpendicular rectangle. Okay? So what if I want a square in my precision? If I Alt and single click, well, then I can just do 2 inches by 2 inches, and it made a square at that point. I can click and make a square without holding down Alt, and it makes it based on that corner point. Okay? Those are all of the creation steps that you can do with a rectangle. Now, some of the other things that you can do, let's say I have this selected, because I do, and within Creative Cloud, the 2014 version or 2015, you have these little radius points on the inside of your square or your rectangle, and you can grab those, and simply by dragging them you can create a rounded rectangle, or you can even make a perfect circle. And now I have just turned my square into a perfect circle. I will select this rectangle here, and I can't make that into a perfect circle because it's not a square, but I can make the two ends be perfectly hemisphere. So I have kind of a hockey rink shape there. Now you can do that with, you can grab the corner points there with one side by holding down Control. Well, not Control, I'm sorry. If you are on that corner point inside of a rectangle, you can bring it out to a rectangle with square corners. Another thing that you can do is, for example, let me move this one out of the way. I can change to the direct selection tool, so A on my keyboard, and I can select just this corner. And if I select just that corner, then I can grab this corner, this radius, and I can drag that until I make, you know, any shape that I really want. So I can do kind of a pie out of a corner out of a pie. Let's do this one up here and not do it as drastically. Whoops, that didn't work. I click on that radius point, and then I can adjust that, and you can have different corners on your rectangle be different measurements. And you can even do them with objects that are hidden behind, as long as you can select it. So there you go. You can turn a square into a rounded rectangle, or any weird shape, even a circle. So let me clear these. And that was Command A, Control A on a PC, and then hit delete. So moving down the list on the shapes, if you pull out by holding down on the rectangle tool icon, you can pull out this panel, and I'm going to go with the rounded rectangle tool next. And this is very similar to the rectangle tool. You simply drag the shape that you would like. You can hold down Shift to constrain it to a squarish, so the sides are all the same. Excuse me. You can point. You can click a point on the artboard and create any shape that you specify. You can alt-click on the, whoops, that didn't do it. You can alt-click on the artboard and make one that is constrained from the center point, and you can change these at any time. If you look at it though, one other thing that you get to do is you can increase or decrease your corner radius. So this one is a 25, it's twice the 24 point that we saw there. Another thing that you get to do with the radius, or with the rounded rectangle, is you can convert it back to a square or a rectangle if you'd like. So it goes either way, obviously. And then if you want to adjust your radius on your corners while you have the rounded rectangle tool, I must have clicked onto something else, I'm sorry. So the rounded rectangle tool, while you have it selected and you are dragging your shape, before you let go of your shape, just use the up to increase the radius or down arrow to decrease the radius, and you can go all the way to a square, or you can come all the way into like a circle. And again, that's just holding down or tapping the up and down arrows. So all of the same constraints apply to the rounded rectangle as the rectangle. Shift to constrain it to a square, Alt to go from center. Let me do that. Shift and Alt to go from center as a square with rounded corners. And then you can manipulate those corners as you desire. Okay, so that's the rounded rectangle tool. And now I will clear these with Command A on a Mac, Control A on a PC, then hit delete, and I have a fresh, clean artboard. Next on the list is the Ellipse tool, which is L, and that's fairly easy to remember, L for ellipse. Obviously, to create an ellipse, we drag the shape, and we can go skinny and fat, or short and fat. We can go tall and skinny. We can go more round, and we can make as many or few as we would like. We can also constrain them to make a perfect circle by holding down the Shift key. Okay, so perfect circle. And if you would like to make a bunch of perfect circles, hold down the Shift key while you are dragging your ellipse tool. You can also, like the others, and you see that it changes, the icon changes once you hit the Alt key or Option, and that will create your circle or your ellipse from center. And again from center, and again from center. So I can do with all those I want. And let me clear these again. Control A on a PC, Command A on a Mac. And now I can also hold down Alt and Shift at the same time. And it really doesn't matter which order you do. Some people would say Shift, Alt. Some people would say Alt and Shift, but it doesn't matter. So as long as you hold them down before you start clicking, or even after. So for example, here I have both held down before I start to drag my circle, and it's constrained from the center, and I let go. Whoops, I didn't mean to let go, but I'm giving my fingers a rest, and now I'm back on them. And Shift and Alt, and now I have my perfect circle constrained around that point. Okay, so it doesn't matter the timing or whatever, as long as at some point I can start dragging my circle or my sphere before I let go of my cursor. So before I lift up my mouse button or before I pick up my stylus, I must have the modifier that I desire. So in this case, Shift, I'm holding down Shift, and now it's a perfect circle. I could hold down Alt, and it goes from that center point. I could do both Shift and Alt, But as long as I have my cursor held down, as long as I have my mouse button or my stylus held down, it will make that. And so I hold them down and then pick up my stylus or my mouse finger. And then I can let go of Shift and Alt, or either or. When you do these modifiers, maybe I wasn't clear because I just realized I didn't explain this part. As long as you pick up, so you start to drag and then do the modifier and then stop the drag to create the shape and then pick up your modifier fingers. Okay? I'll have these on screen, so hopefully you can see that happening. I won't be using my overhead camera anymore. It's just too shaky and it's so difficult to see what I'm doing when my fingers are in the way. So I'll do a different option and hopefully that will help. Long story short, that is the Ellipse Tool, and using most of the functions on the Ellipse Tool. So Alt and Shift and using them together. At some point, I can start dragging my circle or my sphere before I let go of my cursor. So before I lift up my mouse button or before I pick up my stylus, I must have the modifier that I desire. So in this case, Shift, I'm holding down Shift and now it's a perfect circle. I could hold down Alt and it goes from that center point. I could do both Shift and Alt, but as long as I have my cursor held down, as long as I have my mouse button or my stylus held down, it will make that. And so I hold them down and then pick up my stylus or my mouse finger. And then I can let go of Shift and Alt, or either or. When you do these modifiers, maybe I wasn't clear because I just realized I didn't explain this part. As long as you pick up, so you start to drag and then do the modifier and then stop the drag to create the shape and then pick up your modifier fingers. Okay? I'll have these on screen, so hopefully you can see that happening. I won't be using my overhead camera anymore. It's just too shaky and it's so difficult to see what I'm doing when my fingers are in the way. So I'll do a different option and hopefully that will help. Long story short, that is the Ellipse Tool, and using most of the functions on the Ellipse Tool. So Alt and Shift and using them together. All right, for the remainder of this lesson and the rest of these lessons for this week, I'm recording at home, so if it sounds a little different, I don't have my microphone with me. I'm just using the inboard microphone on my computer, and it's just going to have to do because I need to get this done. So the next thing that you can do with the Ellipse Tool is a very interesting thing that we discovered in our one of our classes this past week, and I did a little bit of research, and nothing I could find online showed me what this part or this option in the tool is actually doing. So I took a little bit more time and just played around with it and tried to figure it out on my own, and I will show you what it is I'm talking about. So with my Ellipse Tool, I'm going to drag an ellipse, and as you see, it's just normal. I've got no modifier keys at all. So I'm not using Alt or Shift, and so I've got no keys to kind of adjust what this circle is going to do. And so if I hold down Alt, again, it'll make that ellipse from that center point I started. If I hold down Shift, it'll make a perfect circle from that point that I started. And then one of my students noticed, hey, what happens if I hold down Command or Control? So Command on a Mac, Control on the PC, and watch what happens. Well, my circle shifts. And so you might be wondering, what on earth is that doing? Because it doesn't seem to, make any sense when you're holding it down. So I'm holding down Command on my Mac, Control on your PC, and you'll get this effect. Well, I'll show you what's happening. Let me delete this circle. First, we're going to need a square or any rectangle. So I'm going to go M for my rectangle tool, and I will make a rectangle, and then I'll make a square, and then I want to select them all. So Control A on a PC, Command A on a Mac, and make sure that there is no fill, but I want a stroke. So I'm going to, if I didn't have my colors set up, I would hit D for default colors, and then / to slash out the fill color. Okay, so now I have these rectangles, and I'll show you the difference of what we can do with the Ellipse tool. So I will press L to get the Ellipse tool, and then I'm going to start here at this center point, or at this anchor point within this rectangle, and you can see it up here. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. And as I start to drag from that point, you can see that the sides of the rectangle are tangent to my circle or my ellipse, and I can snap it to the edges, and I can come down here to these opposite anchor point, and oops, I kind of moved it a little bit. Let me do it with my mouse because, like I said, I'm working from home, so my control is not quite as good as what I would have liked with my stuff at work. So I'll use the mouse and go anchor point to anchor point, and now I have this ellipse on the inside of the rectangle. I can do the same with this square, and again I'll hold down Shift to get the perfect circle within this square, and I'll come down to the anchor point, and now I have it inscribed within the square, and this one is inscribed within the rectangle. Now the other thing you can do, again, this is holding down Command on a Mac or Control on a PC. So I'm going to hold down that, but if I do that before I start to draw my ellipse, then it changes to my selection tool. Or if I had the direct selection tool, it would go to that. So instead, I will start to drag my circle from that anchor point, and as you see, it's still the same as the previous. However, once I hit Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, it starts to circumscribe. So make the ellipse on the outside using that point, and then I can go to the other point, and now I have circumscribed this oval, this ellipse, outside of my rectangle. And again, I can do that the same, and you can do any point really, any two opposing points of your rectangle or square to show this example. So I'll start here in this upper right corner, and then once I've started, I will hold down Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and then I will constrain it by also holding down Shift to make a perfect circle circumscribed around the square. And then I'll let go when I get to that bottom point. And now I have the ability, just by changing my modifier, to either inscribe within an object or circumscribe around an object. So, big thanks to one of my students who kind of said, "Hey, Ryan? What's going on here? What's this doing?" Because it caused me to go take a look and figure it out. I think maybe I have. It's sounding familiar, and so when I saw the as I put it within, what I did is I used guides as I was playing around, and so instead of showing you with the guides at this point, I figured I'd use a rectangle. But it kind of made me remember, I think, when I discovered it as a young lad with Illustrator long time ago. But I haven't used it, so shame on me for not keeping that fresh. But now you all know, and go ahead and do some practice with the circumscription function by holding down Command on your Mac or Control on your PC to take your ellipse or your circle and circumscribe it around an object. All right, thank you very much. And next tool we will talk about is the Polygon Tool. All right, working with the Polygon Tool is going to be somewhat similar to both the Ellipse Tool and the Rectangle Tool. I'm going to clear my screen by Control A on a PC, Command A on a Mac, and then hit Delete. And then I'm going to find my Polygon Tool, which is also on the same flyout as the Rectangle Tool, the Rounded Rectangle Tool, and the Ellipse Tool. The Polygon Tool, however, does not have its own shortcut key. You could probably program one in as you do custom keyboard shortcuts, but I'm not going to do that at this point. And here it is, number 4 on the list, Polygon Tool. So the Polygon Tool will work similar to, like I said, the other ones. However, as you drag your polygon out, you'll notice two things. Number one, it goes from the center point where you started, and that becomes the center point of the I don't even remember, half of the diagonal bisector. See how bad my geometry is back, decades ago. So anyway, the center point will be wherever you start to drag, and then the length of that point to the corner of your regular polygon, and that's the second thing you'll notice, is it's a regular polygon. All of the sides and angles within each corner are all they're all congruent. So you don't have to worry about modifying that. So there's no need to hold down Alt for that. If you try to hold down Alt, absolutely nothing happens. Tap, tap, holding it down, no change. So that's Alt, and then also Control doesn't do anything, or Command on a Mac. However, if you, let's drop this one here just for reference. So I'm going to come from a similar point right here, and I'll use my Smart Guide to make sure that my centers are aligned. And I'll start to drag, and then I will hold down Shift. Now as I hold down Shift, it will snap it to constrain on the horizontal axis that is based on the that starting point. So it does look a little different, and you can see that it's not the same as this one over here, and it is going to stay with those two, the upper and the lower lines, as parallel to the horizontal axis on my artboard. So that's by holding Shift, and you can make them any size you'd like. And then the other thing you can do is single click to make a precise polygon. And as you do that, you'll notice two things. They're calling it the radius. I'm pretty sure that's not the technical term because a radius is related to a rounded, a circular, or a hemisphere, or an arc. And basically it's radius will help you remember that easier than half or midpoint of a diagonal bisector. So we'll let Adobe go with radius. I guess that works. So you can change the size of the radius, and again it will default. If I click Enter, it will default to the last shape that I created. We found that with the line segment tool, the rectangle tool, the rounded rectangle tool, and the ellipse tool. If I single click, it will maintain that as well. So I can change that. I can change the dimensions in my units of measure, just like the other ones. But then the other thing that we can do is we can change the sides. It will go all the way down to 3, which we know is a triangle, and it will not go lower than 3 because a polygon with 2 sides is actually called a line. So there's no need to have a 2-sided polygon. It's not a polygon anymore, it's just a line. And then it can go up, I'm told, to, 1,000. And if I try to go more than 1,000, it will not do that. So I can do any number between 3 and 1,000. For example, I could do 7 and have, instead of a hexagon, which is the default, I could have a heptagon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And as you see, it's a regular heptagon. So that's just great. Let's see what else. Because of the nature of the Polygon tool, wherever you click will be, wherever you click will be that center point. And now it thinks I'm going to make one of a radius of 0 because of my mistake just there. So let's do 2.5 inches, and I want to do a nonagon, so a 9-sided polygon. And I'll click OK or hit Enter, and now I have a 9-sided polygon, and it's based on that center point. Okay, so the Polygon tool is kind of fun. Let me clear these, and I will show you one other thing that you can do with the polygon. And that is, as you are dragging your polygon out, as you can see, it started with the last option that I had, which was a 9-sided polygon, but instead I want a pentagon. So I will just click the down arrow. The down arrow on my keyboard will give me fewer sides. There's an octagon, click one, whoops, and it's, as you can see, it's kind of, it's very, very sensitive. You can really go quickly between different, and if you're not extremely careful, I'm back to, what is that, a heptagon, oh, triangle, come on, somewhere in here I can get, I saw a square once too, which is interesting. What a pain. As you can see, it's not the easiest thing to do to get to the desired polygons, and for some reason my keyboard is not helping me very well. I have done it in the past, and it's not usually this difficult. I don't know what the deal is. Alright, let me try with my mouse, because again I was using my stylus and it's not as, apparently today it's not working well. There we go, there's a pentagon. And then I can constrain it by holding Shift, and so the horizontal, which the only horizontal line on a pentagon is that base, the bottom. I guess it's not really a base if it's, anyway, whatever. So there you have it. Let's try to see if Control does anything. No, we've already discovered that. Shift is the only modifier that will work with the Polygon tool. And then I could create another one by clicking over there. So there you have the Polygon tool. And again, the arrow keys shouldn't be as glitchy or twitchy or whatever you want to call it as I'm having today. I don't know quite what the deal is. I haven't seen it be this finicky. But use it if you'd like. And then the other thing you could always do if you want to change the number is single click, adjust your polygon and then delete it and make another one whatever size you want, or you could just resize the one that you had there. Anyway, so that's working with the Polygon tool, and have fun with it. Okay, I will select all of these again with Control A and or Command A on a Mac, then hit Delete to get rid of them. And now we'll talk about the Star tool. The Star tool is over here also in that same flyout with the Rectangle tool, the Ellipse tool, the Rounded Rectangle tool, the Polygon tool, and here it is. So you just click it, it looks like a 5-pointed star, the icon. So how does the Star tool work? Well, if you are following me from the Polygon tool, you will notice something similar. It will constrain or expand from that center point wherever you start to drag your mouse or cursor using your stylus, and you can, kind of make this any old size you would like. And let's look at the modifier options. So there's a star. We'll do another one over here for comparison, and I will hold down Shift with my keyboard. Shift on my keyboard will constrain the horizontal and vertical points on the star. So it'll constrain this line and this line to always be set on the vertical and horizontal axes of the artboard. And that's again by holding down, by holding down Shift. Okay. We can single click. Oops, this is just not my day for single clicking. So single click, it gives us three options. The first option is the radius 1. In this case, its default is the outer radius, or again, it's not a radius, but whatever. So the distance from the center point to this outer point, because a star has outer points and inner points. So you can see that right there, and this will build a star from the point that I clicked on center, exactly the same as the last star, as we noted with the Polygon tool and the other tools. That's how it's going to work. It'll take the last shape that you created and make it. So radius 1, radius 2, and then you have points. So let me click up a couple, and we'll have an 8-pointed star, Star of Melchizedek, if you are familiar with the common names for some of these stars. And as you saw, it was way too small for me to do anything with, so I will drag it up. I'm going to give this one a fill of the default color so we can see it in front of the other one. So 8-pointed star, pretty neat. I can do a Star of David, which is a 6-pointed star. Or I could do a big old starburst by doing like and you can use the arrows to up or down. You can put a 25 points in there if you so desire. And now I have all of these interesting and fun-looking stars. Again, a star can only have as few as, 3 points. If you try to go fewer than 3, you don't have a star, you have a line. So here's my star. A 3-pointed star is by default a triangle. So what do we do to change that? Well, we can manipulate the inner and outer radius as the radii. Let's clear this all. So Control A on a PC, Command A on a Mac, and then hit Delete. And I will do another one of those stars, but I'm going to change my radius to something ridiculous like, say, 30 points and see what happens. So it brought that inner radius all the way in didn't mean to click, all the way into here and left that outer radius to there. Let's do another one, and in this case let's raise it to the 10th power. So 300 point radius on the inner, and now it has become the outer, and you can kind of see this bevel here. It's just ever so slightly beveled away from the other ones. Let's actually delete that because I want it to be more pronounced if we can. Oh, let's go 200 point and 900 point and see what happens. And now it's just inverted. I'm going to zoom out by holding Control and then hitting minus on my keyboard. And that's just ridiculously big. Let's get rid of it. So it's kind of just the opposite. So what you can do with the star tool as you are dragging. So let's make our star. We can hold down Shift to constrain it again. We can hold down Alt. And what does Alt do? Well, it doesn't look like it does anything at this point. However, if instead of Alt we hold down Control as we drag, we do one thing. We will leave one radius where we left it. The other radius is going to remain at the point that I had, and then we can manipulate this radius to make it a super fine point star like you'd see on the Mercedes-Benz logo. You can go all the way out. You can bring it back so it's a little more similar to each other, and you can modify it in those directions. Okay, that doesn't look like a star, but it is. As we know, we're using the star tool. So basically a star is just a combination in the same shape of two polygons of the same number and size. If that makes sense. Hold on a second. So we can increase the number of points on our star just as we did on the Polygon tool by raising or increasing or decreasing using the arrow keys on our keyboard. And then we can switch back to using the Command or Control modifier. Make all sorts of different styles and sizes of starburst. And then once you let go of that modifier, Command or Control, then you're just dragging the size of that starburst. Alright, so now we have a starburst and we have a weird three-pointed star. The next effect that I want to show you, the next modifier, is going to require a little bit of work and understanding here. So let's clear the screen. Again, Control A on a Mac or PC, Command A on a Mac, and then hit the delete key. And then I'm going to do, excuse me, I did it again. Apparently I've done it twice. Let's get rid of both of those. So let's draw our star, and we're going to go down all the way to 3 points. And let's take a look at our star. Let's make it nice and so you can see the points, and I just drug that by holding down Command, switching to the direct selection tool. So I have a three-pointed star, and I want to show you what happens with the other modifier key, which is the Alt key. So let's take that same three-pointed star shape and we will drag that out. Now remember what we can do. Shift will constrain it horizontally and vertically. Command or Control will let us pull in or pull out the angle, or excuse me, the points to make it more pointy or less pointy. In class we were calling it chubby because it's kind of a chubby looking star, and this is a pointy star. So however you remember it, we're dragging the points out by holding down the Command or Control key. Now, if you would like to hold down the Alt key, what happened? It looks like we just created a triangle. Well, in effect, we did. However, it's not the key Alt is not going to make it a triangle necessarily, unless you have a three-pointed star. Let's go up in our direction of star points. Here is a six-pointed star, and let's see what happens if I hold down. I'm going to hold down Shift to constrain it. So if I hold down Shift, and then in this case also hold down Alt, look what happened. So basically this is called, when you use Alt, and I've let go now, when you use Alt, it takes that star, it doesn't matter how many points or what size it is, and it turns it into a perfectly angled star. And why do they call it perfectly angled? Well, I will show you with a triangle, and we'll take our triangle right here, and I will go all the way down to that and hold down Alt. And as you can see, well, my triangle's not perfect. But a perfect angled star means that it is made up completely by all of these triangles, and every star point, why did that happen? Every star point is also a triangle. I don't know why it's going black. That is a weird anomaly. Adobe, fix that. That one turned black. It shouldn't be black. As you see, my fill color is the default colors. So why is this star, or this triangle, why is it black? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I found another bug. Adobe is going to be hard at work if they're watching my videos to keep up with the bugs. So anyway, a perfect angle, which is found by holding down, as you make your star, by holding down the Alt key, and let's make a few more points, and then if I hold down the Alt, everything is a perfect triangle within that. It looks like a circle. So if you go fewer and hold down Alt, the angles become fewer or less pronounced. But you can see in my six-pointed star example, all of the angles are made up of triangles. And that's what the Alt key does. That's why it's called a perfect angle modifier, because it'll turn that into each star point into a perfect triangle. So I hope that makes sense for you. And that is the the star tool, not the straw tool. There is no straw tool. Maybe I need to take a drink of water. So I'm going to take a break, and I will catch you guys on the next one. And we will talk a little bit about the line and color options for these shapes and objects. All right, to get something I can use, I'm going to select all by Command A, Control A, and hit Delete. And you should be very familiar with that. I'll make an ellipse or a circle. I'll make a rectangle or a square, and I'll do a couple of other options. Let's go back to our star tool and make a five-pointed star. Now I have some different options again to work with the color. I can swap and go with the default colors, or swap them using the tools that we've discussed already down here. Shift X to swap, D for default colors. I can also pull them out of the swatch palette that comes off of this click up here. I can select by using the direct selection, the selection tool. I can go to a color picker and choose something from the spectrum over here. I can manipulate the sliders. There's a lot of different ways to go with color. We won't talk about them very much. I can change the stroke on my object. I can click the stroke option, add dashed lines, add arrowheads. There's all of those things that we've already discussed that we can do with the colors and stroke, and I can add funky and custom brushes to those options. So realistically, there's a lot of things I can do with the colors and brush definition and variable width profile. Here's what it looks like in a circle, and you can choose, whatever suits your needs. I've discussed these already, so I'm not going to go into detail. I just want to choose and have a couple of different color options to choose from as I show you some editing shapes. So when you edit shapes, you are concerned first with selecting your shape. Let's click the selection tool, and that will you can use that to select and then move any of your objects that you have on screen. Again, we've discussed all that. The direct selection tool, which is V on your A on your keyboard, A for anchor, can select anchor points. You can select paths or line segments just by choosing a point on that. If you happen to choose an object that has a fill color, in this case this one is white, and we can tell because it's in front of this one that's red. You can just click on it and drag, and it functions kind of like the selection tool. You can move them around as you would like. You can drag selections with the direct selection tool and grab multiple points. You can hold down the shift key to add to your selection of points. Another interesting thing with the direct selection tool is if you hit the Alt or Option key on your keyboard, you can select the group selection tool. And that is very useful. For example, if this were a non-filled object, so let's hit no fill, which is the / because we are slashing that color. So it has no fill in it. If I use the direct selection tool, I'm only going to grab a point or a path on that object. I can't select inside like I can with this red object, and just click with the direct selection tool. However, if I have the direct selection tool and I hold down Alt, it turns to the group selection tool, which will select that entire object, and then I can maneuver it wherever I would like. So we have discussed selecting with the selection tools as I went through the tour of the workspace, and then also bear in mind that we will talk about some other selection issues in the 3.3 lesson or 3.2, can't remember which. That'll be the next set of lessons. And you can just bear in mind that you can edit these shapes. So I could have a regular, a rectangle, and I could then choose the A for anchor tool and grab an anchor and pull it or maneuver it any direction I would like. We've already discussed those kinds of things. The other thing that you can do to these regular circles, ellipses, polygons, and rectangles and stars is you can add shapes to them by the pen tool. Now I've discussed this a little bit when we were talking about the pen tool, but just as you observe here, so if I hover over this path, you can see that my pen tool will try and select the path, if I have the path selected, it will turn into the Add Anchor Point tool, and so I can do that and then manipulate that anchor point. I can delete anchor points from these rectangles and polygons and circles. So for example, if I delete this point off of a circle, then it almost turns into this semicircle thing. If I grab the convert anchor point, I can bring that to a point. I can bring it back out to a circle. I can manipulate the handles by using the direct selection tool, and then I can have a semicircle or a half. Yeah, I guess that is a semicircle. And so you can manipulate any of these, anything that can be manipulated by anchor points, any object that has anchor points, which is pretty much everything. So just select it, add anchor points, delete anchor points, convert anchor points, all of those options to transform or manipulate shapes and edit shapes, as we've discussed in the pen tool. Next, we will briefly again review the color basics and talk about some of those options, and then we will also go into, in 2.4, the finger dance, and that we will discuss all of the modifiers that we've already discussed, and also some that we haven't discussed yet. So stick around, and I hope you're enjoying these, and I'll see you soon.